Mandibles dropped and compound eyes bulged in horror as the Suliban delegation beheld the immensity of TSS Indomitable, a Terran supercarrier that dwarfed their pathetic fleet. Captain Scott Webb smirked at their shocked faces, eager to showcase humanity's martial might. At 2.5 kilometers long, the Steel Titan eclipsed any Suliban vessel. Recently victorious in the brutal Kessler Rebellion and Proxima campaign, Scott and his battle-hardened crew of 5,000 were quite familiar with Xeno expressions of pure dread. As a decorated 35-year-old veteran, the captain lived to see aliens quiver before humanity's technological superiority. "By the Queens, I've never seen a warship so massive. Our heavy destroyers barely reach 800 meters, gasped Ambassador Galen, his iridescent green carapace shimmering under the hangar lights. The towering insectoid rubbed two of his forearms together nervously. "If you think this is impressive, just wait until we simulate bombardment runs on asteroid targets with our 200 strike craft and 50 assault shuttles," grinned Scott. "Our fighters will shred those space rocks like ancient bug artillery versus wet paper." Galen's antennae drooped. The Suliban had only achieved FTL capability a mere decade ago. Humanity already fielded hundreds of these godlike vessels, each a void-born instrument of death. What hope would Suliban ships have against this firepower? Scott clenched his fists, relishing the opportunity to display Terran strength. After decades of Xeno incursions into Sol space, it was time to show the galaxy that humans were not to be trifled with. The Indomitable had to perform flawlessly and demoralize the Suliban. For if this diplomatic meeting failed to secure human interests, a shooting war could erupt between the species. The very future of humanity hinged on this demonstration of force. Scott prayed that his crew was up to the task and that the Suliban would bend the knee. Because if these damn bugs didn't submit, then the Indomitable wouldn't hesitate to send that chitinous fleet straight to hell. Scott led the Suliban delegation down a long corridor, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. He stopped in front of a large blast door, inputting a code on the keypad. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the Indomitable's main armory. "And this is where we keep the big guns," Scott said with a grin, gesturing for the Suliban to enter. Inside, rows upon rows of weaponry stretched out before them. Railguns, lasers, and missile launchers, all gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. A burly man with a scar running down his left cheek stepped forward, saluting Scott. "Captain Webb, sir. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reynolds, weapons officer," he said, his voice gruff. "At ease, Reynolds. I'd like you to meet our guests, the Suliban delegation. Ambassador Galen, this is the man responsible for keeping our arsenal in tip-top shape," Scott said. Marcus nodded to the Suliban, his eyes lingering on their chitinous forms. "A pleasure, Ambassador. As you can see, the Indomitable is well equipped to handle any threat. Our railguns can engage targets at distances of up to 100,000 kilometers, and our lasers can cut through the thickest armor like butter." Galen's compound eyes widened, his mandibles clicking together in astonishment. "Most impressive, Lieutenant Commander. And what of your point defense systems?" A smaller insectoid, who had been introduced as Zek, stepped forward. "Yes, I'm curious about your close-range capabilities as well." Marcus smiled, seemingly pleased by their interest. The Indomitable is equipped with a network of close-in weapon systems, or CIWS for short. These are designed to intercept incoming missiles and strike craft at close range, providing an extra layer of defense for the ship. Suddenly alarms began to blare throughout the armory, red lights flashing. Scott's head snapped up, his body tensing. "Captain Webb to the bridge, repeat. Captain Webb to the bridge," a voice crackled over the intercom. "Looks like the combat exercise has begun," Scott said, already moving towards the door. "Ambassador Galen, if you and your delegation would follow me, I'll take you to the bridge. You'll get a first-hand look at how we handle a simulated attack." The Suliban hurried after Scott, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with anticipation. They emerged onto the bridge, a hive of activity as crew members rushed to their stations. Scott took his place in the command chair, his fingers flying over the controls. Report, he barked, his eyes fixed on the view screens. Simulated enemy fleet approaching, sir. Kessler remnant signatures detected, the tactical officer replied, her voice steady. Scott nodded, his jaw clenching. The Kessler Remnant, a group of human insurgents who had been raiding Terran colonies in the outer systems. They were a thorn in the side of the Terran military, and Scott had faced them in battle before. Launch strike craft coordinate defenses. Let's show these bugs what the Indomitable can do, he ordered, his voice ringing out across the bridge. The Suliban watched in awe as the human crew worked together seamlessly, their movements precise and efficient. Fighters and bombers streaked out from the Indomitable's hangar bays, engaging the simulated enemy fleet with a barrage of missiles and laser fire. Galen leaned in close to Scott, his voice low. Captain Webb, forgive my curiosity, but what exactly is the nature of this exercise? Who are these Kessler remnants you speak of? Scott glanced at the ambassador, his eyes hard. The Kessler Remnant is a group of human insurgents, Ambassador. They've been raiding our colonies in the outer systems, causing untold damage and loss of life. This exercise is designed to simulate an attack by their fleet, to keep our crew sharp and ready for the real thing. As the battle unfolded on the view screens, Scott felt a sense of unease settling in his gut. The Kessler Remnant was still out there, a very real threat to humanity's interests in the region, and while the Indomitable was more than capable of handling them, Scott knew that the insurgents were growing bolder with each passing day. Just as the simulated battle on the Indomitable's view screens reached a fever pitch, a shrill alarm cut through the bridge. Scott's head snapped to the communications officer, who was frantically typing at his console. Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the Terran mining colony on Theta Eridani IV. They're under attack by a Kessler Remnant strike force and requesting immediate assistance, the officer reported, his voice tight with tension. Scott's jaw clenched. He turned to the Suliban delegation, his expression grim. Ambassador Galen, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a real emergency on our hands. We'll have to cut the simulation short. Galen nodded, his compound eyes gleaming with understanding. Of course, Captain Webb. The safety of your people must come first. Scott barked orders to his crew, ending the simulation and setting a course for Theta Eridani IV at maximum speed. The Indomitable's powerful engines roared to life, propelling the massive Supercarrier through the void. As they entered orbit around the planet, the extent of the damage became clear. The colony's defenses had been overwhelmed, and the Kessler Remnant troops were running rampant through the streets. Scott could see fires burning and buildings crumbling, even from this distance. Dear gods, Galen whispered, his voice trembling, those poor souls. Scott's eyes hardened. He turned to his tactical officer. Deploy the Marines, I want boots on the ground now. Within minutes, the Indomitable's Marine contingent was ready to deploy, led by Major John Hawkins. The grizzled combat veteran stood at the head of his troops, his powered armor gleaming under the hangar lights. As the Marines boarded their assault shuttles, Galen stepped forward, his chitinous form dwarfed by the hulking humans. Captain Webb, I request permission to accompany your Marines to the surface. I wish to observe their combat capabilities firsthand. Scott hesitated, weighing the risks, but he knew the diplomatic importance of the Suliban delegation, and the opportunity to showcase human military prowess was too good to pass up. Very well, Ambassador, but you'll be under the protection of Lieutenant Commander Reynolds at all times. Your safety is our top priority. Reynolds nodded, his scarred face impassive. Understood, sir. The assault shuttles streaked down to the planet's surface, dodging enemy fire as they approached the beleaguered colony. The Marines hit the ground running, their weapons spitting death as they engaged the Kessler Remnant forces. Galen watched in awe as the humans fought with a ferocity he had never seen before. Their powered armor allowed them to shrug off hits that would have felled a Suliban warrior, and their advanced weapons cut through the enemy ranks like a scythe through wheat. As they pushed deeper into the colony, the resistance intensified. The Kessler Remnant had entrenched themselves in the main industrial complex, turning it into a fortified stronghold bristling with gun emplacements and barricades. Major Hawkins assessed the situation with a cool eye, his tactical mind whirring. He coordinated a multi-pronged assault, sending his Marines in from multiple angles to outflank and outmaneuver the insurgents. Galen, safe behind the lines with Reynolds, watched the battle unfold through the cameras mounted on the Marines' armor. He saw the humans fight with a brutal efficiency, their movements precise and lethal. It was both horrifying and fascinating, a glimpse into the true nature of human warfare. The Marines pushed forward, their superior firepower and tactical skills slowly but surely whittling down the Kessler Remnant's defenses. Hawkins led from the front, his rifle barking as he picked off enemy soldiers with ruthless accuracy. Galen flinched as a Kessler Remnant rocket exploded nearby, showering the area with debris. Reynolds grabbed him and pulled him down, shielding the ambassador with his own body. "Stay down, sir," Reynolds shouted over the din of battle. "It's not safe out here." But Galen couldn't tear his eyes away from the screens, transfixed by the unfolding carnage. He watched as the Marines breached the complex's main gates, pouring into the courtyard like a tidal wave of steel and fury. As the Marines battled the Kessler Remnant forces in the industrial complex, alarms suddenly blared through the Indomitable's bridge. Captain Scott Webb snapped his attention to the sensor officer, who reported, "Sir, we have an incoming missile barrage from a Kessler corvette hidden in the asteroid belt." Scott's eyes narrowed. He barked orders rapid fire. "Activate point defense systems. Recall all strike craft to intercept those missiles." The crew leapt into action, hands flying over consoles. The ship's CIWS whirred to life, swiveling to track the incoming projectiles. Fighters and bombers streaked back towards the Indomitable, racing to shoot down the missiles before they reached the hull. On the view screen, the Kessler corvette burst from behind an asteroid, thrusters flaring as it hurtled towards the Supercarrier. Scott instantly recognized the suicide run tactic, an attempt to detonate the ship's remaining ordnance point blank and cripple the Indomitable. "Hard to port. Bring all weapons to bear on that corvette," Scott commanded. The helmsman wrenched the controls, sending the massive vessel banking sharply. Railguns and lasers swiveled, locking onto the kamikaze ship. Lances of energy and hypersonic slugs ripped through its shields and tore into the hull, shredding armor and exposing decks to the vacuum of space. But even as the corvette disintegrated under the onslaught, it launched one final volley of missiles from its remaining tubes. The projectiles streaked towards the Indomitable, too close for the recalled strike craft to intercept in time. The point defense guns opened up, filling the void with crisscrossing streams of tracer rounds and pulsing laser beams. Missiles detonated left and right, consumed by the wall of flak. But several slipped through, slamming into the Indomitable's armored hide. The Supercarrier shuddered as explosions blossomed across its hull. Damage reports flooded in from all decks, breaches in the outer armor, fires in multiple sections, casualties mounting. But the great ship held together, absorbing the punishment through its robust construction and redundant systems. Scott never lost his cool, even as the bridge shook around him. He snapped out orders to damage control teams and corpsmen, coordinating the crew's efforts to contain the destruction and treat the wounded. All the while, he directed the strike craft and marine forces on the ground, determined to see the mission through. In the colony below, Ambassador Galen watched the titanic space battle unfold with a mixture of awe and fear. The destructive power on display was beyond anything his people had ever witnessed, but what struck him even more was the iron will of the humans, their refusal to bend even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the last Kessler remnant insurgent fell to the Marines' rifles and the gutted corvette spun lifelessly in the void, a sense of pride swelled in Scott's chest. His ship and crew had been tested as never before, subjected to the full fury of a desperate enemy. And they had triumphed, safeguarding humanity's interests through skill, courage, and indomitable spirit. As the last echoes of battle faded, an eerie calm settled over the ravaged colony. The Indomitable's marine teams swept through the ruins, securing key infrastructure and tending to the wounded. Captain Scott Webb coordinated the recovery efforts from the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screens. Suddenly a transmission crackled through the comm system. The voice on the other end strained with emotion. "Captain Webb, this is Corporal Jennings from Theta Squad. We have a situation down here." Scott's brow furrowed as he leaned forward in his command chair. "Report, Corporal." "Sir, it's Lieutenant Commander Reynolds. He's been hit." The bridge fell silent, the weight of the words hanging in the air. Scott swallowed hard, his mind racing. "What's his condition?" "Critical, sir. Sniper round to the chest. Our medics are working on him, but—" Jennings trailed off, the unspoken truth clear in his voice. Scott closed his eyes for a moment, steeling himself. "Keep me updated, Corporal. Do everything you can for him." As the transmission ended, Scott turned to his communications officer. "Get me a secure line to Ambassador Galen. He needs to know." Minutes later, Galen's holographic form flickered to life on the bridge, his compound eyes widening as he took in Scott's somber expression. "Captain Webb, what's happened?" Scott met the ambassador's gaze, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Ambassador, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds has been critically wounded in the line of duty. He was protecting you when a Kessler sniper—" Galen's mandibles clicked together, his voice trembling. "No, this can't be. Is he—" Scott shook his head. "Not yet, but his condition is grave. Our medics are doing everything they can, but the prognosis is not good." The ambassador's form seemed to deflate, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the news. "Captain, I don't know what to say. Reynolds, he saved my life." "He was a brave man, Ambassador. One of the best," Scott said softly. "I'm sorry." As the call ended, Scott slumped back in his chair. The toll of the day's events etched on his face. He had lost men before, but it never got easier. And now, with the fragile alliance between humanity and the Suliban hanging in the balance. A chime from the comm panel interrupted his thoughts. It was Corporal Jennings again, his voice heavy with grief. "Captain Webb, sir. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds has succumbed to his injuries. He's gone, sir." Scott felt a cold knot form in his gut. He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Thank you, Corporal. I'll inform the ambassador personally." The walk to the Suliban quarters seemed to stretch on forever, each step weighed down by the burden of the news he carried. When he reached Galen's door, Scott paused, gathering his thoughts before pressing the chime. The door slid open, revealing a visibly shaken Galen. The ambassador's eyes met Scott's, and in that moment, no words were needed. Galen's mandibles quivered as he spoke, his voice raw with emotion. "He's gone, isn't he?" Scott nodded solemnly. "I'm so sorry, Ambassador. Reynolds was a hero until the end. He gave his life protecting you, protecting the alliance between our peoples." Galen's clawed hand gripped Scott's arm, a gesture of shared grief and understanding. "Captain, I have seen today the true measure of humanity's strength, not in your ships or your weapons, but in the courage and sacrifice of your people. The Suliban Confederacy has much to learn from your resilience, your determination in the face of adversity." As the Indomitable set course for Earth, its halls echoed with a somber silence. In the ship's morgue, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reynolds lay draped in the Terran flag, a final tribute to his valor. Scott stood beside the fallen officer, his head bowed in quiet reflection. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Reynolds's death was a stark reminder of the risks they faced, the price paid for defending humanity's place among the stars, and with the Kessler remnant growing bolder, more dangerous with each passing day. Scott found Major Hawkins in the Marine Armory, his scarred face lined with weariness. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the racks of weapons before them. "We are going to make them pay, sir," Hawkins said quietly, his voice hard as steel. "For Reynolds, for everyone we've lost." Scott nodded, his jaw tight. "We will, Major. But we have to be smart about it. The Kessler remnant is like a cancer, spreading through the outer systems. We need to root them out, stem by stem, before they can metastasize further." Hawkins met Scott's gaze, a fire burning in his eyes. "We'll be ready, sir. The Marines, the fleet, will take the fight to them, for the Terran Stellar nations, for our allies, for Reynolds. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.